Hello. Hi. Welcome to the stream. Welcome to Unitary Designation. This is my first YouTube live stream, and it's very exciting to try out this technology. I mostly just pre-record these videos in a one-take format, and so doing them live is sort of what I do anyway. It's just not direct. I just record it in a file and upload the file, so I thought, let's skip that step and make a video just off the cuff, so to speak. So I've been having a lot of different thoughts and a lot of different sort of angles of analysis that I've been wrestling with. One of the questions I keep coming back to is what to talk about. Because when you make a YouTube channel, or when you speak your mind in general, more broadly, you can say too much and you can say too little. And I spoke about saying too little in my video on silence, which you can check out, where I criticized a certain Canadian psychologist for never stopping to speak. And, you know, part of that is fine. You can keep finding ways to reinvent yourself, and sometimes you have that much to say, right? So it's not outside the realm of possibility that there's a space, for a continuous conversation. When you run a podcast or any kind of media format, you obviously have to keep talking. If you stop putting out, I hate this term, but content, then, you're automatically yesterday's news. And it's like, well, is that healthy? I mean, I certainly don't upload every week, and I'd rather not force something, just make videos that don't have any kind of content in them just to make them. But I'd also want to, kick my own ass and sort of keep putting out videos in a timely manner. So there's something to that discipline, that structure, that rigidity, but there's also something to, like, not just talking out of your ass, right? I mean, we all know podcasters who, on times run on fumes, and it's just not enjoyable. And there's something about market-oriented solutions when it comes to speech that is like, so much is required to generate well thought out, so much neurological activity and sort of processing is required to generate something that is worth public attention, at least in my case. And the thought of having something, of just speaking without having anything to say, strikes me as kind of wrong in a way. You sort of have an obligation to at least respect your audience's time as much as you'd respect your own. I would never loyally sit through a boring YouTube video from a YouTuber I followed just out of loyalty. I just don't have that in me. And I would want you guys to feel that you had to stick with me or something. If the content isn't good, it's not good. But with that kind of quality regimen, you have to regulate how much you put out. You can't have high quality standards and high output unless you're an outlier, unless your conscientiousness personality traits is off the charts and your life circumstances permit you to be that productive, which, your mileage may vary. But okay, so there's an almost infinite number of subjects to talk about, right? Can talk about the culture wars, can talk about transgender rights, can talk about Ukraine, can talk about Twitter, can talk about, Dave Chappelle, can talk about stand-up comedy. there's so many like things and so many angles and so many sort of ways to approach it. And I don't necessarily have a specific political or socio-cultural agenda. I kind of more want to help offer a middle way through these very complicated and charged topics, if that makes sense. Some way to incorporate the best points of the left and the right without necessarily falling into any of the ideological traps. Now, that's obviously easier said than done. And you could say that, well, my assumption that there is such a thing as a middle way that somehow encompasses both of these extremes is a, you know, pick your terms. It's that's my subjective, that's my power game, right? I want everyone to believe that there is a middle ground when in fact there's only the left or there's only the right. And if you're on these sides, you can take those points. And you know, depending where you are on the political spectrum, you could say that my middle way is, you know, on the left or my middle way is on the right. Now, I tend to view history not necessarily in a Hegelian fashion, but it seems to be the case that the universe, like Terence McKenna said, is a novelty preserving engine. That is to say, it keeps generating new things. New elements, new star systems, new complex geological formations, new complex biological formations. It keeps adding on complexity. That's a good observation, if a bit localized. The Earth certainly seems to follow that pattern. You know, Watts talked about the Earth just from a certain angle just being a bunch of dead rocks, but if you look at it closely, you'll see that the rocks are peopling, and there's something to that kind of perspective that human existence, or existence in general, biological existence on Earth, is something that is an epiphenomenon of the laws of physics. And the universe is the laws of physics, and the laws of physics led to intelligent life that keeps inventing new things like AI. It's sort of, the universe seems to be expanding towards complexity. It has this sort of Aristotelian teleological direction towards complexity. And you can disagree, of course. You know, most of the universe is dead rocks or just empty space. So, you know, that's a valid objection. That's a metaphysical, which perspective is you know, most functional. But so my take on it is that the universe seems to favor complexity, seems to favor biology to its absence. And history, following from this, seem to follow in a progressive direction. It's hard to be a conservative and be on the right side of history. It just seems to be the way it is. But, big but there. That doesn't mean that there's nothing to structure, discipline, tradition, rituals, you know, markets. Like there's nothing wrong. You obviously need some kind of structure in order to preserve whatever you want to move forward. Like if you want a university system to move forward, you need a system. You need, you know, teachers and students and payments and classrooms and all that stuff. So there has to be some kind of traditional structure that is maintained. It can't be total anarchy all the time. Now the question obviously is like, how much novelty should you include and how much tradition should you include? And you know, people vary, but history seems to slowly eke its way towards more novelty. So when I say that I want to offer my suggestions for moving, you know, unifying the left and the right and the finding a middle way between all sorts of extremes, not just political, but spiritual, existential. It's finding some kind of non-dual approach to things, a way of encompassing every perspective into a coherent, personal, existential undertaking. I do that knowing that eventually I'm going to fall to the left, but not too far to the left, and not without respecting and understanding the need for tradition. Because you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. You can't kill the past and throw everything out and just reinvent yourself all the time. If there's one thing I've learned from studying mythology and stories and narrative structures, it's that we respond to these things primally. We primally respond, like genetically respond to stories of the hero's journey, confronting the dragon, getting the gold, saving the person in distress, coming back to the tribe with meat. Like, we respond to these with gold, right? With treasure, with surplus calories. We respond to these because they emulate the pattern of behavior that made our existence possible. You go out, you confront the demon, right? The dragon, the ox, the lion, whatever. You emerge victorious from physical combat with the treasure, with meat. And, everyone is fed, nourished, and, the health, right? And so we respond to these stories because it's like a mantra of sort. It's like, yes, that's correct. That's how we got here, and that's how we keep being here in time. So it's a very pragmatic approach to truth. Truth is whatever functions and continues in time. So how do we respect our biological substrata, right? Our limits? How do we accept that there are certain hardware errors in the human system, such as the inability to include people who are different than us in our in-group? How do we factor that into a way of being that is compassionate, is caring, is moving forward, is in unison with the absolutes? How do we reconcile the biology with the transcendent? The first thing to do is to acknowledge both things. Like, you can't delude yourself about the need to be spiritual. And you can't delude yourself about being a biological being. If you refuse the fact that you are, for lack of a better term, a hairless ape, then you remove every possibility of transcending that, of using that to transcend it. You have to start by accepting this is the legitimate limitation. I have these prejudices. I have these tendencies that can run amok. I still accept it. I want to be better. Now what can I do? And additionally, you also have to accept the fact that there is such a thing as a world beyond your thoughts. There is such a thing as the transcendent, as the highest good, as the superior, I don't even want to say superior intellect, but something that is driving the show, that you can be a part of and surrender into. But only by having those two points of view firmly anchored can you attempt to live out that truth, that authentic state of being in your life, moment to moment to moment to moment, forever. And it's hard to start generating that capacity, but it's worth it. It's easy to keep doing once you've gotten into the habit of it. One way you can tell that you're in this state is that you don't judge anymore. there's not a lot of judging other people from this position. You tend to see everyone as yourself struggling. Now that might seem too far for people who are firmly on the right. I am me, you are you, and borders and boundaries are absolute. That's fine. I've seen firsthand the need for a heaven, the need to conceptualize the transcendent as something that happens after biological existence, precisely because the people who are instantiated too rigidly in their biology realize that it's futile to overcome it with the transcendent in their daily life. They will have to be part of the one, of God, of heaven, of transcendent being after death. I don't think that's true, but I can respect people who can admit their own shortcoming to that extent. They can say, I am closed off to the transcendent to this extent that I can't instantiate it in daily life. But that should be the end of it, in my opinion. You shouldn't take your own, how would you say this? Your own shortcomings as permission to impose frameworks of living onto other people. Like, if you can't surpass your biology, surpass your tendencies towards, pick a defect, if you can't surpass your ability to see other people of different color as, fundamentally different than you, fine. But don't then implement, in my opinion, don't enforce overly structural things on other people. Don't enforce your conceptualization of the transcendent as law-giving apparatus today. Don't, not trying to be preachy, but, other people's autonomy, other people's ability to live to live their life in authentic manners, as long as, they don't infringe on the rights of other people and, don't act antisocially. Your right to impose limits on other people is, as far as I'm concerned, it's, it's non-existent. Your ability might not be non-existent. It certainly is existent. You can impose rights to people. You can impose limits to people's rights to marry who they love, or how they choose to reproduce or not reproduce. And that, I don't think that that's cool. I just don't. I have respect for people who need faith and structure, transcendently aligned structure to get through their life. I have respect for that. None of us are perfect. And, none of us are able to live without the transcendent dimension. But you're not going to get to the transcendent dimension, in my experience, by imposing limits on the world. Trying to fix the world in order to avoid suffering is a lot like trying to remove all pointy rocks from the ground. It's just much easier to wear sandals. You can remove your own suffering. You don't have to force the world to be a certain way. It's not going to bend to your will anyway. All you're going to do is create more suffering for people who aren't you. And, we have to learn how to live together, right? And all anyone can do is to offer their own perspective, like I'm offering mine on certain topics. It's hard to offer a kind of synthesis of everything on all topics, because you'd have nothing else. first of all, you'd repeat yourself a lot and you'd have nothing else to do. But also, there are things that you can viably comment on. Like, I just made some overlapping meta commentary about how to incorporate the transcendent element of the human existence and the biological element of the human existence. And if you're oriented towards love, it doesn't really matter where you are at on that scale. You know, you can be Gandhi or you could be, you know, the opposite. But if your orientation is to try your best, be compassionate, have love, then that's fine. It's not necessarily compassionate to never expect something of someone either. Like, you can hurt people with overarching compassion. In fact, you're not being compassionate if all you do is feel sorry for someone. You're not letting them, you know, grow into the best version of themselves. And that's sort of cruel in a lot of ways. And I mean, conflict is hard. You know, we all avoid it all the time. And we're not doing ourselves or the people we avoid the conflict with any favors. And that's just the way it is. But you can at least recognize that, recognize what is the correct thing to do, right? What is the truth? If you recognize that I should take conflicts in a healthy, productive, constructive, adult way, at least you know to feel bad when you avoid that, right? If you think that conflicts are something that is beneath you or something, then you delude yourself. And that's even worse, because then you don't have the mechanism to correct your deficiency even. So authenticity, for me, existential authenticity, always start by recognizing what is true and what is false. And if you cling to what is false, then you're really just hurting yourself. If you address what is true, then at least you, okay, fine, I fall short of my ideal, but I know what the ideal is. And just knowing is half the battle. You can save yourself so much suffering by just acknowledging what is it I'm supposed to do and what is it I'm not supposed to do. And then when you fall short of what you're supposed to do, be forgiving, be empathetic. It's much better to know what is wrong and to forgive yourself for not living up to it, or know what is right and forgive yourself for not living up to it, than pretending it isn't right. Because that pretending never works. It only bends and twists reality in a weird way that you and the people around you are going to have to pay for someday anyway. So it really doesn't work. It just brings more suffering. I want to add that there has been an ongoing debate in the intellectual, spiritual sort of subject of conversation, like how do we bring about a coming to terms with what is quickly enough, like an authentic awakening. Or people have used different kind of sort of words for this, like a collective waking up is always talked about in spiritual sort of milieu, and a cognitive revolution, and what was originally called woke, like being aware of social issues. Like, how do we bring this spiritual awakening kind of thing to a large enough number of people quickly enough? And there's been various sort of faith movements which have gone nowhere. There's been political movements which definitely went nowhere. Socioeconomic systems that went backwards. McKenna, keep coming back to him, said that the use of the mushroom, the Psilocybin molecule, was the best bet because it induced these authentic psychedelic states in people reliably, consistently, and in a dose range that people could tolerate. And there's good neuroscience now on psilocybin, the mechanisms of action, the safety protocol. It functions by lowering the blood supply to the default mode network, which is like this sort of centralized tasking network that generates a sense of selfhood. And psilocybin works by chemically shutting that off for a period of time, which is the same thing that people do in meditation. They've done fMRI studies of, Theravada meditators, study at Yale, which did fMRI studies of these guys, and their default mode network stayed disabled during the fMRI scans with no chemical components in their systems. And they gave psilocybin to people and observed the same deactivation. So it's theorized that the psychedelic experience that are induced by the mushrooms are caused both by the synaptic activity of the psilocybin molecule in the serotonin receptors, but also by deactivating the default mode network. And it makes sense that if you can induce that kind of state in people reliably, consistently, in a healthy way, which psychologists have started to do with PTSD sufferers, with depression, with terminally ill cancer people. They have started to use psilocybin carefully in studies. And people report it as the most meaningful experience of their lives. People have reported as being meaningful, helpful, significant, and incorporating that has made their lives better, more compassionate. There's a big 5 personality model: conscientiousness, openness, openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. People increase 1 standard deviation in openness to experience, one of the 5 traits, after a psilocybin trip. So there's something that makes you more open. That's not necessarily exclusively a good thing, but it at least opens your mind, your biological, like the way your brain wires itself, to another way of being. And you can choose or not choose which parts to incorporate. But yeah, the use of that tool and the reliability with which it induces these kind of experiences, it speaks promising. If psilocybin uses in 50 years, slowly through rigorous trials, incorporated as a mainstay depression treatment as opposed to SSRIs, maybe we can find a way to navigate as a culture. Maybe. It's conceivable. Because it isn't something that a psilocybin experience would be a personal undertaking by the existing individual. It wouldn't be something that's imposed from above. It wouldn't be a social system. Wouldn't be an enforcement cost economic system. It wouldn't be a religious system. It would just be personal experiences of what is meaningful to the individual, to you. So it's not like it would require any kind of conversion to any kind of way of thinking. It would be a personal experience that you had with yourself, by yourself, or with a psychologist, or whoever, friend, whatever. It's it's certainly if you had to find something that could de-escalate the political tensions and the geopolitical conflicts that exist, if you had to nominate a short list of things that could work, mindfulness, talk therapy, hugs and kisses, if you had to make a short list of things that could work, psilocybin is on that list. And it's good to know that there are some, there's something you can do. There are things that you can do before all-out nuclear war. There is actually something. In depression cases, it's often just helpful to know that there is something you can do. Like, you can do electroshock therapy, or you can do ketamine treatments. There is something that can be done before it goes terminal. And the same happens to be the case with humans on Earth. Before we blow each other up with a nuclear, scenario, there is technically something we could do. It's not likely, but it's within the physical laws of the universe, there is something we can do to ensure a future, and that is wide-scale use of these things. So that's hopeful. Yeah, that's a hopeful note. It's There's a lot of interesting research on this. It used to be just hippie talk, but now there's not large scale, but there's a large number of clinical trials on psilocybin effect, and that's good. So yeah, I started this video by talking, or the stream, by talking about you can say too much, you can say too little. I went on to talk about what the intent of the channel is, to offer a kind of synthesis of different perspectives into like a unifying, or at least like an attempt to create to offer a perspective of how to be authentically in the world. And I guess I've decided that it's better to offer that than to not offer it, because, you know, here I am, right? So I hope you enjoy this video. Thank you for watching to the end. If you have any thoughts, suggestions, comments, any suggestions on improving the production quality, feel free to offer that. I hope you have a good day. Thanks for watching. And yeah, drink your cup of coffee and keep working towards a better future. Keep being existentially authentic in the moment. And I'll see you guys later.